Pikmin 4 is a game about anxiety. Everything about the Pikmin games is like a simulated anxiety attack, and Pikmin 4 is no different. Every Pikmin must be accounted for at any moment, and the Pikmin are so dumb that this game will have any sane person pulling out their hair. It's also a game about accepting death and becoming comfortable with setting your subordinates into almost certain death. At the beginning of any Pikmin playthrough, I always try to save all the Pikmin, and never succeed. Usually within the first day I forget about this. In this game, I managed to save 75% of my Pikmin. Allowing cute things to die and strict micromanagement with time limits is what Pikmin is all about. It's hard to see why the series hasn't received mass acclaim yet. It's a boring, repetitive affair, but someone has to do it. I keep coming into these games thinking, there's something about this, but Nintendo just hasn't found it yet. With Pikmin 4, Nintendo comes closer to making an actually good game, but still does not quite hit the mark. The visuals in Pikmin 4 are the best in the series, and some of the best in recent Nintendo games. The levels are intricate, and the challenge of making the world look as big as a Pikmin would see means there's always something new to appreciate. The world is a different place when you're small, and Nintendo relishes out in bringing the novel to the tiny. Despite the improved graphics, some parts of the game, especially the first couple levels, do fall flat. The earlier stages in the game have a near identical feel to levels in previous games. In a game with only 6 areas, that's a pretty big deal. Levels do get more interesting in the later stages, featuring the inside of a home and some forested campground areas. I'd like to see more variety in the Pikmin levels. With 4 titles under their belt, they could open up to some new types of areas. The Pikmin aesthetic has always been a sort of twisted and humorous mix, with cartoony sci-fi, realistic worlds, and weirdly adorable minions and cute monsters which are capable of casually murdering your entire squad of lovable chums. The morbid mix is a big part of what made the earlier games interesting, and it's no different in this one. Some of the levels do veer in a more infantile direction, which personally I don't like as much. The night levels add a new vibe to the game, which is fun to explore. The alien-like glow Pikmin are also fun to see in action. I'd like to see more night game. I give the visuals a 7.5 out of 10. The story in this game is, at its core, exactly the same as previous games, albeit with new characters. A team of rescuers crash land on a Pikmin planet once again. The protagonist, this time the player makes their own, must find their home squad as well as locate the elusive Olimar from the original game. In the player's search, they find out that they are not only the only ones to crash on Kopai, and in fact, there appears to be many castaways this time, whom the player must rescue. Over the course of the game, the player collects Pikmin and rescues castaways who can give the player new objectives. During the course of the game, the player meets a new nemesis called a Leafling. The Leafling's parent chief will often harangue the player and then challenge them to a Dandori battle. More on the battles later. Once the player finally manages to locate Olimar and bring him in, the team takes off and the credits roll. A short but sweet picnic experience. Only the game isn't actually over. After the credits finish, they realize their dog companion Ochi has a leaf on his head and he cannot leave the Pikmin planet safely. So, they return, and the game continues. Mid-game credits, kinda cheesy and annoying joke, and it wouldn't be surprising if a lot of people just turn off the game at that point. Once the player returns, a new foe appears. It's Louie from the previous games, and he is more deranged than ever. For some reason, Louie is just a madman, and Nintendo never addresses this. Otherwise, the game proceeds to the last 2 levels, same as before, with new castaways to save and harder battles. The story is repetitive, basically the same as previous titles. The addition of the many castaways adds some much needed variety to the story. The game is humorous on many occasions, especially considering the vast number of people who apparently crash-landed on Pikmin Planet. Does anyone not crash when they come here? After 4 titles, I would like to see a new story for the characters. I give the narrative a 7 out of 10. There were a number of new additions to the game in Nintendo's new installment to the Pikmin series. Aside from the new Pikmin types, they added ice and glow types. The ice types are similar to the rock types with the ability to freeze pools and allow the player to traverse them. The glow types are separate from the other types as they can only appear at night. The dog is the real game changer for the series, and a big part of my own decision to give the series another go. The dog Ochi can carry the Pikmin on its back, along with the player, and it allows the player to jump. It's an extremely useful game mechanic, and it can gather the Pikmin into a tight group, one of the biggest nuisances of the previous games. The jumping allows for a slight platforming element, which was absent in previous games. I'd like to see Nintendo go further in this hybrid performing direction, rather than the Dandori direction, which is another big feature of the game. Throughout the game's areas, the player meets leaflings, castaways who have gone native and become covered in leaves. The leaflings will challenge the player to what they call a Dandori battle. Basically, a Dandori is a frantic timed micromanagement competition in which the player goes into an arena and either needs to collect a certain amount of resources in a short period of time or compete against the leafling in a direct micromanagement battle. I have to say it, I think Nintendo is really missing the mark with the Dandori concept in Pikmin. The Dandori battles take all the fun out of these series. Stressful time, micromanagement, and sloppy Pikmin mechanics force the player to optimize every action. The later Dandori levels often took me multiple tries, and even the easy ones are just stressful and not fun at all. Every Dandori battle is like a miniature anxiety attack for the player to contend with. The strict time limits in the Pikmin games are the least fun aspects of the games. In earlier games, the time limits were stricter because the player only had a certain number of days to achieve all their goals or else run out of oxygen. This title is far more relaxed, and there is no limit to the number of days the player can spend on the planet. The days are still timed, however, and the player must rush at the end of each day in order to corral their Pikmin, or else allow them to be eaten by the wild beasts of the night. The game would be more fun if they just got rid of the time limits altogether. If they got rid of the anxiety-inducing time limits, the game could actually be a very pleasant experience. The night battles are actually pretty fun. They basically made a tower defense game where the player must gather pollen from the glow Pikmin during the night in order to cure the leaflings of their disease. In order to get the pollen, the player must defend their 1 or 2 hives from the beasts of the night. The glow Pikmin are stronger than the other Pikmin, and they can't be hurt by the elements, though they still can be eaten. The sub-levels can be a bit jarring because the player transitions from a normal landscape to the world below through a pipe system. However, the underground levels often don't thematically make any sense, taking place in absurd locations such as toy boxes and Mario-like levels floating in vast chasms of the darkness. The combination of Dandori battles, disconnected night and day, and weird underground levels gives the game a very arcadey feel. I'd like to see Nintendo rein in their arcade instincts and turn the Pikmin series back into a more cohesive world. an open-world Pikmin game could be very interesting, giving the player more freedom to determine their hours and perhaps allowing them to go out at night with their regular Pikmin as well. I give the gameplay a 7.5 out of 10. All in all, Pikmin 4 suffers from the same issues its predecessors have. It's a game which still seems to have a lot of potential and yet never quite hits that sweet spot. It's somehow simultaneously boring and stressful. I want to see them nail a Pikmin game, which is actually fun to play. They are making progress with the new platforming elements, but the introduction of new stress-inducing Dandori games ruins all the fun parts. If you've played Pikmin games in the past and liked them, this is the best one yet. Otherwise, I wouldn't actually recommend this game to anyone. Nintendo should forget about the micromanaging nightmare that is Dandori and give us a Pikmin without time limits that is actually fun to play. I give the game a 7.5 out of 10. And a stopwatch, because it's about time that Nintendo makes us the Pikmin game we deserve.